A mummy cries for her little girl who never came back home. Now a family live in a shattered world, straining at the seams. Her cries have left a ringing in your ears. Her eyes pleading for release. Do you feel her mounting fears? Because only you can give relief. Please, Mr. Cruel, let her go safely without harm. Please, Mr. Cruel, send her back into her family's arms. That song was written by a family friend of the Chan family in Melbourne, Australia. It was released in 1991 as a public appeal directed at a man who had kidnapped a 13-year-old girl and was holding her somewhere in the suburbs of the city. The man was known only by a name the tabloids had given him, Mr. Cruel. He was never caught. And what you are about to hear is the story of how one of Australia's most intelligent, meticulous, and terrifying predators operated across 3 confirmed attacks and what may have been a murder, while leaving behind almost nothing that could identify him. The first known attack linked to Mr. Cruel took place in August 1987 in the suburb of Lower Plenty, about 16 kilometers northeast of Melbourne's city centre. At 4 a.m., a man removed a window pane from the lounge room of a family home and let himself inside. He was wearing a mask and carried a handgun and a large hunting knife. He moved directly to the parents' bedroom, forced them face down at gunpoint, and bound their hands and feet with knots that investigators later described as consistent with those used by sailors or people accustomed to securing heavy loads. He then went to the children's bedroom. He tied a 6-year-old boy to his bed. The family's 11-year-old daughter was the focus of his attention. Before he assaulted her, he instructed her to clean her teeth. He was in no hurry. He remained inside the house for approximately 2 hours. At one point, he went to the kitchen and made himself a meal before returning. When he was finished, he searched the house and took 2 items: a box of classical records and a dark blue coat with a fake fur collar. Before leaving, he picked up the telephone and made a call, referring to whoever was supposedly on the other end as Bozo, and warning that person to move their children or they would be in danger. Police later established that no call had actually been made. The phone had not connected. He had been staging a scene designed to confuse investigators, to suggest that others were involved, that there was a network, that the records and coat were meaningful. None of it was. It was all noise. The attack was reported, a file was opened, and the offender disappeared. Tuesday, December 27, 1988. The Willis family home on Hillcrest Avenue, Ringwood, a working-class suburb about 23 kilometers east of Melbourne. John Willis was up late completing a jigsaw puzzle. He couldn't sleep and didn't want to disturb his wife, Julie. At 5 a.m., he gave up on the puzzle and went to bed. Their 4 young daughters were already asleep. 30 minutes later, someone broke in through the back door. He was wearing a ski mask and blue overalls. He went straight to the parents' bedroom, where Julie woke to find him standing over her pointing a gun. She screamed. The man told her to stop. He pressed the gun to John's temple and asked, "Are you going to be a hero?" John shook his head. The intruder bound both of them face down on the bed with copper wire. He demanded money. John indicated the bedside table. The man took $35 that was there. Then he walked to the children's room. Sharon Willis was 10 years old. She had been woken by her mother's screams and was lying as still as she could, pretending to be asleep. The intruder came into the room and called her by name. He already knew who she was. The Willis family had been featured in a local newspaper article several months earlier after a house fire. Sharon's photograph had appeared in it. He had done his research. He covered Sharon's mouth with masking tape, blindfolded her, and carried her out of the house and into the night. About 15 minutes after the intruder left, John and Julie managed to work through the copper wire and free themselves. John ran to the children's room. Sharon was gone. The phone line had been cut. He ran to a neighbor's house and hammered on the door, asking them to call the police, then began running the streets around the neighborhood, calling Sharon's name. Sharon was not in any of those streets. She was somewhere else entirely. She would be found 18 hours later at around 11 p.m. that night, wandering alone near Bayswater High School, about 8 kilometers from where she had been taken. She was wearing a man's shirt over her own clothing and had garbage bags around her. A passing motorist saw her and stopped. Sharon had been held captive for 18 hours and been kept blindfolded throughout. Before releasing her, her captor had gone to extraordinary lengths. He washed her thoroughly, scrubbed under her fingernails, cleaned and flossed her teeth, and dressed her before putting her in the car. He wore gloves. He had driven with his headlights off. About 45 minutes before Sharon was found, a driver near Bayswater had nearly collided with a white Holden Commodore, turning without lights. The driver, furious, had pulled up beside it at a red light to confront the other motorist. The man in the Commodore turned his face away and inched forward, clearly wanting nothing to do with the confrontation. When the light changed, the Commodore turned down a side street near Bayswater High School. The driver didn't get the plate. At a press conference afterward, the detective in charge said, "We can only dread what the man would have done if the girl had pulled off her blindfold and seen his face. It is that close to being a homicide. It is only one extra step." Police connected the Ringwood attack to the Lower Plenty case. The same careful method, the same extreme attention to cleaning and forensic avoidance, the same interest in children in a family home, the same use of restraints, the same man. The state government announced a $100,000 reward, believed to be the first ever offered in an abduction case in Victoria's history. No arrests were made. 18 months passed. Then on Tuesday, July 3rd, 1990, he came back. The Linus family lived on Monmouth Avenue in Canterbury, an affluent suburb about 17 kilometers west of Ringwood. They had moved from England 4 years earlier. Brian Linus was a partner at the accounting firm Price Waterhouse. The family's time in Australia was nearly over. Brian's placement had concluded. Bags were being packed, and in just a few more days, they would be flying home to England. Nicola Linus was 13. Her sister Fiona was 15. Their parents were out for dinner that night with friends. The girls were home alone. At 11:40 p.m., a man in dark clothing and a black ski mask forced open a rear window. He was armed with a knife and a handgun. He went to the girls' bedroom and woke them, threatening them into silence. He tied Fiona's hands. Then he turned to Fiona and said, "Tell your father I want $25,000. He directed Nicola into another room and told her to pack her school uniform. Nicola was a student at Presbyterian Ladies' College, a private school in Melbourne. He put her uniform and underwear into a bag, took the car keys to the family's rented Holden Berlina, and forced Nicola into it. They drove away. When Brian and Rosemary returned home 40 minutes later, they found Fiona, still bound, alone in the house. Nicola was held captive for 50 hours. During that time, she was kept bound and blindfolded. She heard large aircraft passing overhead at regular intervals, very close. She was given food and drink. Her captor watched the press conference Brian Linus gave on television and commented on it to her. At one point, she risked a look beneath her blindfold. A dangerous decision, given that he had told her, "My freedom is worth more than your life." What she saw would later allow investigators to produce detailed sketches of the bedroom and bathroom where she was being held. The bedroom had cream carpet, peach curtains, and bedding, a radio playing continuously. The bathroom had an unusual layout, a basin at the entrance, then a shower with a glass sliding door and a separate bath. The house was on a quiet street, a right-side driveway, only a couple of steps to the front door. At 2 a.m. on July 6th, Nicola's 14th birthday, her captor put her back in a vehicle. He drove her to a suburb called Q, stopped the car, sat her on the ground, with her head between her knees, and left. After a few minutes, she made her way to a nearby house and called her father. She was alive. She was unharmed in any physical sense visible to the eye. Police announced they had collected forensic evidence from both the Linus home and the abandoned rental car, though they did not specify what it was. The family flew back to England. The case remained open. In September 1990, Victoria Police sought the assistance of the FBI, who produced an extensive psychological profile of the offender. No name, no face, no arrest. 9 months later, Saturday, April 13th, 1991. The Chan family home on Sirius Road in Templestowe, another affluent Melbourne suburb close to Canterbury and the other attack locations. Carmen Chan was 13 years old. Her parents, John and Phyllis, owned 2 Chinese restaurants and worked extraordinary hours, sometimes 15 to 18 hours a day. That evening, they were both at the restaurant. Carmen was home with her 2 younger sisters, Carly, 9, and Karen, 7. The 3 girls were watching a television special on Marilyn Monroe. At around 9 p.m., a man tampered with the property's security gate and got onto the grounds. He walked to one of the family's cars parked in the driveway and, using white spray paint, wrote several phrases on it. Payback, motor car, Asian joke deal. All of it was noise. A red herring designed to direct police toward a racial or personal motive and away from what he had actually come for. He entered the house and came down the hallway. Carmen and Carly had heard a sound and gone to investigate. They found him. He forced both girls back toward the bedroom, where he found Karen huddled behind the door. He threatened all 3 with a knife. Then he put Carly and Karen inside the bedroom wardrobe and pushed the bed against the door to trap them inside. He took Carmen. 15 minutes after they left, Carly and Karen pushed through the wardrobe door. Carly called her father at the restaurant. John rushed home, searched the surrounding streets, found nothing, and called police. When the dispatcher heard a masked man with a knife had taken a 13-year-old girl, all available units were called to respond, including a helicopter and canine teams. A police dog picked up a scent trail heading north to a nearby main road. Then the scent ended. That was where he had parked his vehicle. Nobody had seen or heard anything. The previous victims had been held for 18 and 50 hours respectively, then released. Police remained cautiously hopeful. Detectives appealed publicly. The state government announced another $100,000 reward. John and Phyllis Chin appeared at press conference after press conference, barely holding themselves together. Please bring my daughter Carmen back home. Carmen, this is your favorite dress. You wore it last Saturday. You left home. You have to come home and wear it. We're waiting for you. Carmen, your sisters need you too. Days passed. A week. The school holidays ended. The other Mr. Cruel victims had been home long before this. Carmen wasn't. By the time Operation Spectrum, a dedicated task force of more than 40 investigators, was formally established on May 6th, the hope of finding her alive had quietly started to fade inside the investigation, even as no one said so publicly. Carly, 9 years old, began sleepwalking. She would walk into the living room at night saying, "Carmen, where are you? Have you come home yet?" An officer from the task force witnessed this happening and said quietly afterward, "I've watched her. She is definitely asleep. It's a bit scary." Operation Spectrum became the largest policing task force in Victoria's history. More than 27,000 people were interviewed. 30,000 homes were checked against the description Nicola had provided of her captor's house. 910,000 kilometers were traveled by investigators chasing leads. The FBI was consulted. Scotland Yard was consulted. Crime Stoppers received over 10,000 calls. In what was described as an unprecedented act in Australian policing, a leaflet bearing Carmen's photograph was delivered to approximately 1.4 million homes across Victoria, with additional deliveries into South Australia and New South Wales. Close to 100 billboards went up around Melbourne. The total cost was $3.8 million. Carmen's sisters wrote open letters. Karen, 7 years old, wrote, "Dear Carmen, I miss you a lot of time. I'm very scared in the dark, and Mum and Dad miss you very much. Mimi is sick because she misses you too." Mimi was the family dog. Carly, 9 years old, wrote, "Whoever has my sister, I would like her back, because then she can help me with my homework and also take good care of my little sister and me. Carmen, I wake up all the time. I need you, Carmen. Please bring Carmen back. Carmen, Mum, Dad, Karen, and I are waiting for you. We all miss you very much with all our hearts." Phyllis Chan wrote open letters directly to the man who had taken her daughter, addressing him as Mr. Kind, not Mr. Cruel, and asking him to let Carmen go, telling him she believed there was good in him, telling him her daughter's sisters wanted nothing for their birthdays except their sister. None of it worked. By May 1991, an unnamed police source told a journalist, after 3 weeks and no contact, "You've got to say it's not looking good. In the past, he's let them go, but this one has gone on too long." On April 9th, 1992, 4 days short of the 1-year anniversary of Carmen's disappearance, a man walking his dog along a track near an electricity commission site in Thomastown, about 20 kilometers from where Carmen had been taken, found a human skull near Edgar's Creek. The area had recently been leveled by earthworks, disturbing what lay beneath. Police conducted an extensive search and recovered further remains. 3 gunshot wounds to the skull. It was Carmen. Her body had been there for almost a year. Whoever had buried her knew the area. The Chan family had been about to hold a press conference to mark the anniversary of Carmen's disappearance. It was canceled. Detective Inspector David Sprague, who had led the investigation, told reporters, "Although John and Phyllis may never hear the laughter of their daughter again, they can now say goodbye to Carmen and put her soul to rest as she deserves." The 3 gunshot wounds were considered by investigators to be significant. Both previous victims who had survived their captivity had kept their blindfolds on. Carmen, her mother believed, was not the kind of girl to accept what was happening without fighting back. Phyllis told police she thought Carmen may have torn off her blindfold and confronted the man holding her, and he had told one of the earlier victims exactly what he would do in that situation. "My freedom is worth more than your life." He had meant it. Police wrote to every one of Victoria's 10,000 registered doctors, asking them to consider whether their duty to the community outweighed doctor-patient confidentiality. The letter suggested Mr. Cruel may have sought treatment after Carmen's death, that the murder of a child, after a pattern of releasing his victims, may have caused significant psychological distress that could have driven him to a professional. Many doctors responded. Investigators flew to the United States to attempt contact with a convicted offender who had followed a similar pattern of abduction and release before eventually killing one of his victims. The degree of overlap between his profile and Mr. Cruel's was notable, though whether any useful exchange took place was never publicly confirmed. In January 1993, police released new details that had previously been withheld. Victims had heard large aircraft passing overhead during their captivity. consistent with a home directly beneath a flight path near Tullamarine Airport. In one case, a victim had covertly looked around the room, despite being warned not to. The details she had provided, the bedroom layout, the bathroom configuration, the right side driveway, the quiet residential street, had now been released to the public because the task force had already searched some 30,000 homes in the surrounding area without a match and was running out of options. They needed the public to help identify the house. Around 1,400 more tip calls came in. Every house was followed up, none matched. Operation Spectrum was scaled back to a core group of 10 detectives in June 1993. It was formally disbanded in January 1994. By then, the investigation had generated 74 separate charges against individuals for unrelated offenses uncovered during the inquiry: drug possession, firearms violations, child pornography, and other matters. The scale of the investigation had also led to lasting changes in how Victoria Police conducted all future investigations. Minimum standards were established for crime scene preservation, exhibit handling, and record keeping. Prior to Spectrum, evidence from some of the earlier linked attacks had been lost. The masking tape Mr. Cruel had used to bind one of his earliest victims, tape that by the time the cases were linked might have yielded a DNA profile, had been discarded. It had never been examined. That tape, said the lead detective, might have solved it. Over the years, a number of individuals were seriously considered as suspects in the Mr. Cruel case. In 2010, Victoria Police established the Apollo Task Force following what was described as substantial new intelligence. Detectives quietly worked through the lead for about 8 months before closing the task force in June 2013, having concluded the intelligence was not credible. In early 2013, the Herald Sun reported that a convicted child sex offender named Robert Keith Knight, who had committed offenses in both 1980 and 1996, had been a person of interest. He died by suicide in 2013. The investigating detective stated publicly that in his view, Knight was not Mr. Cruel. The Sierra Files, the task force's own dossiers on the 7 most credible suspects, were made public in 2016 by the Herald Sun, along with victim statements and the full FBI profile. All 7 individuals named had, at various points, been identified by police as requiring further investigation. As of 2016, 32 people in total had been identified by Spectrum as possible suspects who could not be eliminated. In 2016, on the 25th anniversary of Carmine's abduction and murder, Assistant Commissioner Stephen Fontana announced that the reward for information leading to Mr. Cruel's arrest and conviction in connection with Carmine's murder had been increased from $100,000 to $1 million. A separate $200,000 reward for information on the surviving victims' abductions also remained in place. Anyone providing information was also offered immunity from prosecution by the Director of Public Prosecutions. Fontana said, "We have always maintained that someone in the community is an associate or knows the offender in this case. We have always thought someone would know and be close to him and know that it was him." In July 2024, more than 30 years after Carmen Chan's body was found, veteran Melbourne crime reporter John Sylvester published a piece in The Age Drawing on a new profile of Mr. Cruel, developed by a team of profilers working under the name Stalk Inc., System to Apprehend Lethal Killers. The profile contained several notable suggestions. It proposed that Mr. Cruel may have been a burglar who progressed to kidnapping children, noting that his behavior showed real-world experience in breaking and entering. The precision of his entries, the speed with which he moved through unfamiliar houses in the dark, the professional quality of his restraint techniques. All of it was consistent with someone who had spent time in other people's homes without their knowledge. The profile also suggested he may have been prominent in beautification or maintenance works along Edgar's Creek, the waterway near where Carmine's remains were eventually found. And it noted he may have been known as an avid amateur photographer. At the same time, the Naked City podcast, hosted by John Sylvester, revisited the case with new interviews, including one with the first officer on the scene at the Chan abduction, a retired sergeant named Rod Phillips, who said he was not entirely convinced the case had been investigated from the right starting point. He suggested detectives may have moved too quickly to attribute Carmen's disappearance to Mr. Cruel without exhausting every other possibility first. It was a rare note of official dissent in a case that has otherwise maintained a clear and consistent theory for more than 3 decades. The FBI profile of Mr. Cruel has been made publicly available. It is, as all profiles are, a guide rather than a guarantee. But it describes a man of considerable specificity. White male, aged between 30 and 50 at the time of the attacks. Slim to medium build, around 175 centimeters tall. Small pot belly. Fair or sandy hair, possibly green. Possibly reddish-brown, according to information provided by one of the surviving victims. Sometimes unshaven or with a short beard. Possibly wears glasses. He appeared tidy. He was intelligent and methodical. He had an obsessive relationship with cleanliness that extended to every aspect of his crimes. He was likely employed in a stable occupation, possibly in a low or senior management role or self-employed, which would have given him the freedom to move around Melbourne during the day and to conduct surveillance of potential victims without accounting for his time. He had access to a separate property during the abductions. He was creative and visually oriented. To the outside world, he presented as kind, genuine, and interested in children. A good neighbor, probably introverted. The kind of man people had no particular reason to suspect. He used specific words and phrases during the attacks: worrywart, bozo, missy. Small verbal habits, the kind that people use without thinking, that can sometimes place a person in a time and a place and a social context. After each crime, his behavior likely changed noticeably. He would have been under considerable stress. He may have taken time off work, seemed distracted, appeared preoccupied. If he was in a relationship, that relationship would have shown unusual dynamics. A partner who had no idea, or a partner who noticed things and didn't know what to make of them. Someone knew this man, possibly still knows him. If he is alive, he is in his late 60s to mid-80s. He may have moved, he may have retired, he may still be in Melbourne, living a quiet life in a tidy house somewhere beneath a flight path. The case remains open. As of 2025, Mr. Cruel has never been identified. The Chan marriage did not survive. The investigation, the grief, the years of waiting, the relentless public exposure, all of it dismantled what John and Phyllis had built together. They divorced. Phyllis lost the house, the car, and came close to losing her restaurant. In early 1995, she was returning home alone late at night, carrying the restaurant's takings when she was attacked from behind and beaten severely. She required surgery and more than 60 stitches. An ex-employee was responsible. He had been watching her for weeks. The investigators who worked Operation Spectrum did not emerge unscathed either. The case consumed years and took a toll on health, marriages, and family lives across the task force. David Sprague, who led the investigation, described it afterward as the monkey on his back that's still there. He said he believed Mr. Cruel was likely one of the tens of thousands of people police had actually spoken to during the investigation. Someone who sat in a chair across from a detective, answered questions calmly, and walked away. Australia had faced many frightening crimes. But for a period in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Mr. Cruel operated at the center of something that felt different. A fear that was specific and total. Not war, not disaster. Just the knowledge that a man in a suburb very much like yours had walked into a family home in the early hours of the morning, called a child by name and carried her away, and had done it before, and had not been caught. Parents installed new locks. Parents told their children not to let anyone know when they were home alone. Parents lay awake listening. The children who lived through that time remember the feeling that safety, which had always seemed like a given, was not. Please, Mr. Cruel, send her back into her family's arms. He never did. He was never caught. And somewhere in Australia or somewhere else in the world, he almost certainly still exists. Either alive or recently not. Either way, he got away with it. If you have any information about the Mr. Cruel attacks or the murder of Carmine Chan, contact Crime Stoppers Australia at 1-800-333-0000 or submit a tip anonymously at crimestoppers.com.au. The reward stands at $1 million for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Carmine's killer, and $200,000 relating to the surviving victims' cases.